Okay, I think Gordon. No. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody here today for poetry reading with Rita Ann Higgins. Rita Ann Higgins was born in Galway and lives in Galway, and her first collection of poetry, Goddess on the Merview Bus, appeared in 1986. Rita Ann has since published multiple collections of poetry, with the most recent being Tunglish in 2016, Our Killer City in 2018, and Pathogens Love a Patsy, Pandemic and Other Poems in 2020. She is a member of Éisteanna and was Galway County's Writer-in-Residence in 1987, Writer-in-Residence at the National University of Ireland in Galway in 94-95, Writer-in-Residence for Offaly County Council in 98-99. She was Green Honours Professor at Texas Christian University in October 2000. Other awards include Peadar O'Donnell Award in 1989, several Arts Council bursaries, and Sunnyside Plucked was a Poetry Book Society recommendation. She was made an honorary fellow at Hong Kong Baptist University in November 2006. In 2020, during the COVID-19 crisis, Rita Ann became the People's Pandemic Poet Laureate for the Brendan O'Connor Show on RTE Radio 1 and wrote weekly poems about the crisis. This, as well as her recent collection, Pathogens of a Patsy, has led to Robert McCrum calling Rita Ann the Poet Laureate of the New Normal. So we welcome the Poet Laureate of the New Normal here today. Thanks very much, Rita Ann, and for being here today. And I suppose if you want to start with a poem.
Okay, definitely. Here we go. Thanks for your lovely introduction. This is called The Power of Prayer. I liked the way my mother got off her bike to the side while the bike was still moving, graceful as a bird. We watched out for her after benediction. It was a game who saw her headscarf first. I nearly always won. The day the youngest drank paraffin, we didn't know what to do. All goofed round the gable end. We watched, we waited. Headscarf over the hill. Knowing there was something wrong, she threw the bike down and ran. She cleared fences with the ailing child. Mrs. Burke gave a spoon of jam. The child was saved. Marched indoors, we feared the worst. Our mother knew what the problem was. Not enough prayers are being said in this house. While the paraffin child bounced in her cot, we prayed and prayed. We did the creed, a blast of the Beatitudes. The Black Fast was mentioned. The Confiteor was said like it was never said before. Mary Goretti was called. So was Martha. We climaxed on the Magnificat. After that, it was all personal stuff. I liked the way my mother got off her bike to the side while the bike was still moving, graceful as a bird. For good neighbours with jam, for Pope's intentions, for God's holy will, for the something of saints, the forgiveness of sins, for the conversion of Russia, for Dr. Noel Brown, for the lads in the Congo, for everyone in Biafra, for Uncle Andy's crazy bowl, for ingrown toenails, and above all, for the grace of a happy death. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I suppose when I read so much of your poetry, I get like Catholicism is always there. Could you, especially from kind of poems of, I suppose, that are talking about childhood, I suppose, how much of an important part was, I suppose, Catholicism or the church in your younger years, I suppose, as a child?
Well, growing up, it was very much like being in a vortex of Catholicism with the symbolism, and it was just a saturation, really, you know, as children. But I didn't mind it because that was what I knew. In it, there was a lot of fear, and the big presence was the invisible God. And so I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified of God. Because God was everywhere and God knew everything. And so it was everywhere. It just, my mother was very, very religious, but she was also really, really nice. So I just took it because she was the administrator. And she was a very, very kind and very loving, very gentle, and very good with other people. And we weren't allowed to gossip. You couldn't talk about people, couldn't say bad. You certainly couldn't curse. And she had tremendous gentleness as well. So, but it was all there, and it was really like, when I look back on it now, it was very much like being in a vortex, because you were whirling in, and the Sacred Bleeding Heart was following you, and Saint Martin de Porres, because these were the icons these were the pictures that were on the walls.
Yeah, and even the Bleeding Heart of Jesus is even outside the door there, somewhere down the hall, I think, even here. So it's
you could have been in the vortex too. You're a bit
I suppose like recently, I think you even sent me on a piece beforehand, and I think I was reading it was with RTE that you started listening to the Bible again.
Yes.
Was it in Audible? I think was it the second lockdown?
Yes, it was the second lockdown. The first one wasn't too bad. The first lockdown wasn't too bad, because I was writing these books for, as you say, for the Brendan O'Connor, these poems, and they ended up being a book called Pathogens Love a Patsy. So quite a chunk of that book was really these pandemic poems. But then the second lockdown came, and I like to have projects. I like to have something to do.
Yeah.
What is it they say about the idle mind? The idle hands are the devil's work.
Yeah.
So
Devil loves idle hands.
And also the devil is everywhere. But anyway, so I thought I listened to this Bible now from page 1 to the final page. So it was 80 hours.
Jeez.
Over a period of over 3 months, So I listened to it on my morning walk at the beach or in the car. Couldn't listen to it when I'd be with the grandchildren, because they'd scream, "Turn that off!"
They just get sucked into the vortex. I was going to say, but what drew you back to that? Why did you? What was it in the moment of the pandemic, or was it just kind of everything coming back, or was it for solace, or what? Was it interest, or was it poetic, or?
I always dipped in and out of the Bible. I have a big Bible there behind me somewhere, and there were parts of the Bible that I liked that I would go back to, and I didn't ever have it in completion. I thought, what would it be like to know the story, not the real story, because how would we know the real story when it spans so much time and so many actors and so many authors in it, and 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and so many different. And then, like, what is allegorical, and what are you supposed to take as the real deal? So I actually, after it all, I thought about it, and I thought, Jesus, I don't mind Jesus. I actually don't mind Jesus. And I thought God was a bit of a bully in it. He came across to me as a bit of a bully. And then I was saying, but sure, Jesus is supposed to be connected to him. It's supposed to be 1 and 3. So you've lost me with the kind of a science fiction-y thing. So I didn't think about that. I didn't think about Jesus, God, and 3 and 1. I didn't think of the 3 and 1 at all. I just thought, I'm liking the Jesus person, and I'm devastated about the crucifixion, and I can't even bear to think of it, even now, or I can't ever bear to think of it. And I know it used to upset my mother in the church, going to seeing the Stations of the Cross, and it used to upset me because it was frightening. And if you think that if you believe that happened to one person, that's I found that the most horrendous part of it all. But I liked very much some of the Gospels and some of the parables, and I love the yarn of it, the storytelling.
Yeah.
That would be mostly in the New Testament.
Lovely. And you mentioned your mother there, and I suppose that'll kind of lead us on to your next poem. This was No Ithaca.
Right. That's from her. Yeah, that's from Hurting God. Uh, I'll read the poem first and we can chat about it afterwards.
Yep.
This was No Ithaca. The women of Ballycrua never filled their heads with yellow and pink rollers, letting on to be going somewhere when there was no somewhere to go. Somewhere was where other women went, women with magnolia vision and pencil-shaped dreams, and always a Jezebel cigarette between those blood-red lips. The women of Ballycrua filled their heads with a loving godling, whom they duly served every waking second. They implored their loving godling to follow their vagabond sons down the alleyways of Cricklewood and Camden Town and further afield. If the pencil shapers turned the heads of the husbands, and if the husbands called out the wrong name when they were claiming their God-given rights, what harm was it, for God's sake? It was fine with the women who never filled their heads with yellow and pink rollers and never let on to be going somewhere when there was no somewhere to go. These women were busy imploring their loving godling to keep their daughters in a state of grace until the wedding night, and not allow shame to fall on the family by letting any daughter of theirs waddle down the aisle with the belly full of baby. For the favour sought from their loving godling, the women with no rollers would wear their knuckles inside out, making God's altar shine. And God's marble was a sheet of ice, and the husbands whose heads were pencil-shaped turned saw themselves in it when they went up to receive the body of Christ. The women of Ballycrua made many sacrifices, and the deity was always the same, their own godling. He kept them on their toes. They praised him often, at doorsteps with arms folded, at bus stops and at the solemn novena, and any place that resembled a cross, ditch, bohreen, or bog. Except for Mrs. All-Over-Hurt, who had no deity that wasn't in a small brown bottle that brought instant rapture. And when she tossed 3 or 4 of them beauties onto her palm, they took away the rasping pain of the day the other woman's God let her only son kiss the face of a raging truck. This was no Ithaca. No sweat was ever broken trying to reach here. You could get here by taking a bus from Eyre Square and collecting your parked bike from a friend's garden and cycle the last mile. There was no Poseidon here to blow a hole in your dreams. This was a place you didn't need rollers in your hair for, letting on to be going somewhere when there was no somewhere to go. This was Ballycrua. All you needed was a loving godling to polish and die for.
Thanks very much. I suppose, could you talk to us about that poem, and where it came from, and why it was written, or I suppose even your own thoughts on Catholicism and your experience of it in Irish culture, and from, I suppose, women in Catholicism too, and that relationship.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. I probably don't need to really look at the poem. First of all, the community I grew up in was quite a small community. Like it was a 12 cottage area, and it was a time when you really loved your neighbours and you felt very safe with your neighbours. And the one thing that I remember, well, I remember many things vividly about it, but I remember that a lot of the daddies drank. You know, a lot of the daddies drank, and a lot of the mammies prayed. So, like, that was my childhood, really. That the mothers did so much for God. Everything was for God, and it was probably, their faith was so strong that it was probably a great comfort to them. And the thing about leaving the bicycle at a certain place, my mother used to leave the bicycle inside a wall at Merview. She'd cycle so far, and she'd leave the bicycle inside a wall. It would never be locked. And then she'd get the Merview bus into town. And then when she'd come out, she'd collect her bike, and that was her journey. She was coming back into God town into hard town really. But I mean, it's hard through my eyes. So I can't. I mean, it's arrogant really to be saying how it was for other people, because maybe they were very happy to be praying and to be polishing and to be, there's this comfort. Sometimes I used to love the washing board back in the day. There was a certain therapy in that, really good. But I just don't think, in the scheme of things now, Catholicism hasn't really embraced women in the way that it should have. They're really still the second-class citizen. Sure, don't we let them give out the communion? I haven't written that poem yet. Haven't we let them? Look at the little, the crumbs. It's really very much still the crumb. Catholicism, it's still women and the crumbs. It's just, it's very sad.
Yeah.
And with Pope Francis, like, we thought, this is going to be good. He's going to make changes. But he didn't do anything really. He didn't make any changes. All the popes before him didn't really make any changes. So it has to come from within, and it has to come from some powerful priests within the church, priests and bishops.
Yeah.
And
do you think it'll change in the future?
God, it's like
you'll probably be saying that every 10 years for the next.
Yeah, it's like swimming through treacle, really, and it's so off. It must be so off-putting for the younger generation. I mean, for young feminists now, that'd be very off-putting for them. Feminists coming up with looking at an establishment, and if it doesn't bother you at all, you'd have to say, why does that not bother me? This oppression of women by the church. So it bothers the hell out of me, let me tell you.
And I suppose being bothered by things will probably lead us on to our next poem. It suits a narrative.
It suits a narrative. Yes,
that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in Killer City as well. And you see, after all the work done by the women over the years, in the church and for the church, was there an expectation of some kind of an investment because of all this, or was it completely unconditional that they did it? I don't know. But when you look at what happened then in the church, there was so many awful traumas. But I'll read this poem first, and I'll tell you that this came about when I heard the CEO of Karen Nua speaking about it on the Joe Duffy show. There's an article in the Times about this as well, but I took that out of the epilogue. It suits a narrative. Some applicants will never be happy, and grievances suit a narrative of the big bad church and the big bad state and the big bad building with the big bad gate. We ration our compassion, while all you say suits the narrative of the big bad state. We ration our compassion, but we'll give you a couch. We ration our compassion, but we'll give you new windows. We are the keepers of the church's money. We divvy it out in dribs and drabs. We won't give you money, but we'll give you new teeth, a new radiator, a brand new funeral. It's not that we want your pain to be everlasting, but by the same token, it suits a narrative for you to come on here and complain and say we have no compassion. We have oodles of it, but we ration our compassion. If we give you stuff without humiliating you, it won't feel right. You ask, we give, or maybe we won't. So fill this form and fill another, and another, and another, and one for your sister and one for your brother. And while you're at it, one for your mother. Don't listen to the guy who said criminal records are given out like Holy Communion to people in institutions. We all know he stole an apple. Otherwise, why would he have been there? Some applicants will never be happy, and it suits a narrative of the big bad church and the big bad state and the big bad building with the big bad gate. And that was about the redress board for people who'd been in institutions for years. And then they were given things, they were given windows and teeth and a coffin, you know, they're like,
yeah,
this kind of thing. I just felt it was
belief, like,
and more pain on pain, adding insult to injury. And then I just found that really painful to listen to, and I felt I couldn't do any. What could I do about this? You know, I felt utterly useless in the face of it, because I hadn't known a second of their suffering. What must have been like for them.
Yeah.
And when Catherine Corliss spoke to the church after her find, you were seeing the past through the prism of the present, a bishop said to her. So she did the research on the mother and baby home, as you know, and made the discovery of the babies in the septic tanks. So we don't have a great track record as a church, do we? You know, we don't have. Where's the kindness in it, like?
Yeah, especially when you look at things like that. And we had Kaylin Hogan, I think she wrote the book Republic of Shame, on all those issues, like, and she did a lecture there a couple of weeks ago for the IICS, and the hairs in the back of your neck were standing early, you know.
I must get a book, actually. I'd love to read it.
It was just, she gave a lecture, she spoke for 45 minutes, I think, and it was just horrific, like. But I suppose then when you're going through the redress boards and it's crapping it all back up for people as well, like, that's
and shame, yes, and shame and guilt are the big trippers, really, aren't they?
And we do them well in Ireland, like, you know, we always fall back on them, you know. I wonder, I don't know, what are your thoughts on guilt and shame in Irish culture, I suppose?
I'll read a poem about guilt first, if you don't mind.
If you want,
I'll do that, and then I can. It's in Ireland. This Changing Mother, page 16. I was a tiny bit proud of this. Like, you know, another thing about having praising yourself in any way is perfect for both.
How dare you?
How dare you say anything nice about yourself? You know, and that is a residue from the Catholic past, you know. But anyway, the reason I was a tiny weeny bit proud of this, but very, 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 very tiny weeny bit, was because I wrote it in Irish, Tussock. But I'm not going to read it in Irish today. I'll read it in English, because I didn't print out the Irish version, but it'll be so easy, because it's an easy poem. Anyway, I'll start with the poem. Guilty. I was young. I was afraid of everything. The magazines were coming. The Far East, the Irish Messenger of the Sacred Heart, and the rest of them. I was 4 or 5 years old. The magazines were coming. Everyone in the house was going to confession, going to Mass. Everyone was sad. They said to God, "We are sad, God." I was young. I was sad too. I said to God, "I'm sad, God." Something was happening. The magazines were coming. Bread and jam was plentiful in the house. The magazines were plentiful. I was afraid of everything. I was guilty. The hens were guilty. The dogs were guilty. The stones were guilty. The line in the middle of the road was guilty. We were all guilty. We drank from it. The well was guilty. We drank from it. We were all guilty. So, I mean, I was doing an interview recently for the International Cork Festival, Poetry Festival, and Patrick Cotter was interviewing me, and I was talking to him about the magazines coming, and I have always been crystal clear about the titles of them, the Far East and the Irish Messenger of the Sacred, but I couldn't remember their names. And I've said, you know them. And I mean, how would he know them, you know, if I'm talking about my experience? And I swear to God, I felt traumatized saying the names of them, even though I didn't realize that, you know, it was a bit overwhelming, all that guilt and all that shame, and, you know, and the extreme levels of modesty. And but that was it really. It existed hand in glove with the Catholic ethos, and I'd hardly say it would go on now. I don't know, because I'm not a practicing Catholic. I don't know if it goes on or if it's still the same. But it is very hard to remove yourself from it to the nth degree, because I find myself saying a lot, please God, especially in relation to my grandchildren. Oh, please God, So I find that absolutely harmless. I don't think it's any harm to say that. And I bless myself when I pass the graveyard. And there's some things that you just wouldn't be able to not do.
Yeah.
And then there are other things that you would get over some things. Like, I look on Mass as a sacrifice, and when I go, it's a sacrifice. But I like it when I go, because I know I'm making the sacrifice, and I quite enjoyed it when my sister died. I didn't enjoy that obviously last year, but I went to her Mass, and I thought, well, I'll take communion for Mary, and I did. Well, I could have been taking it for myself, but I'd rather say I was taking it for her. So I thought that was kind of nice, but that would have been the first time I did that for a very long time. And I have a priest friend, and he says, "No, you're skirting very close to it all, because it comes up so much in my work."
Yeah.
And Genesis and quotes and everything from the Bible. But anyway, guilt, which get back to you were mentioning guilt and shame. Yeah, unfortunately, it's everywhere, isn't it, really? And
It is,
I could be reading the book you quoted, believe you me.
Yeah, no, her lecture was, I haven't read her book, the whole lot of it yet, but it's just, yeah, it's an intense enough read. I think, look, we're at time there, Rita, and I'll just stop the recording here. Thanks so much for coming here today.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. I know everybody else will have enjoyed that. 1 second now.
Thanks very much. It was good to talk to you.